Hi, Paul.
Hi, Spencer. So, I was just thinking we haven't really we have not really talked much about the Magic Leap news. A little bit. We talked about it 3 weeks ago when the news kind of broke. A little bit more when we had Graham on last week. But at this point, we should really just thank Magic Leap because it's really set us up with a great lineup of guests. So that brings.
We have literally 1,000 guests.
Yeah,
that we could bring through if we wanted to.
And so today,
and who's that?
Today we have Brian Schwab joining us, and I think we have approximately 2 or 3 years worth of guests now, based off what happened. So,
hi, Brian.
Welcome.
Hey. So just so that your viewership knows, Paul hired me at Magic Leap, and eventually I hired Spencer at Magic Leap.
No, you didn't hire me.
No. He was on my team at a certain point.
I was
joking.
I worked for Brian, and that's why I put that image of the Schwabich.
That is true. That is true.
Actually, let's jump right into that. So, why did you join Magic Leap? Is what I wanted to
know. So first I'll answer that one, and then I'll answer Spencer's. I joined Magic Leap because I had just made my 18th or 19th game, and it was one of those things where I knew that I could go off and make another game and do that thing, or I could step outside of my comfort zone and learn a bunch of new stuff and Magic Leap was about as new as it could possibly get, right?
About as uncomfortable as possible.
I used to joke that I didn't step out of my comfort zone. I went so far that I occasionally would send it Christmas cards. You know what I mean? It was just gone.
Yeah.
There was no comfort.
You jumped out of the plane.
Yeah. A perfectly good airplane. And so that was really the biggest reason. To be brutally honest, when I took the initial demo, because I'd been in games for so long, I sat back and I watched Sam do every single little tap dance that I knew he was doing to make the demo quote unquote better. I was like, okay, I know exactly why he just moved his hand. I know exactly why he just took that step forward. I know exactly why he's telling me to look to the left right now.
These are purposeful moves.
I just watched him tap dance, and so I wasn't even all that super impressed with the demo or anything like that. For me, it was more okay, I see there's a lot of potential here. And this is something that I could do, and it was a place to grow, really.
Yeah, I mean,
which is exactly what it ended up being.
I think we talked a little bit about it with Graham about our kind of demo experience, and I think we didn't talk about this part of it, but we did have kind of the same impression. Not that we weren't impressed, but it was more man, we really can help these people with their content, right? Because the demo, the content of the demos was pretty weak. I'm gonna.
It was not good, and their storytelling for why you were going across the demo and the whole 9 yards. They never really fully got to the point where they were professional demoing. They were still just sort of tech demoing for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a part of your hiring process, and what I thought was always interesting was you had really built up a name for yourself in the games industry in the AI side of things, right? And Hearthstone was the last thing before, and so we only it was kind of like the Neil Stephenson story a little bit, where we're oh man, this guy is bringing so much domain expertise. We talk about AI type stuff here all the time. He's gonna bring this real world hardcore game. I don't think you ever did any AI stuff at Magic Leap. Not really.
not actually sat down and wrote any code. Yeah. I mean, I definitely sat with Rabinovich for a really long time and a bunch of Monos' guys and tried to steer them in the right direction. And then sometimes I would go down to studios and help them out with some implementations on Create and some other things. But for the most part, no.
Yeah.
That was.
Well, you served a more important role.
I think that's a very Magic Leap circa that time kind of behavior too. They hired people who were domain experts in their field, some of the finest, creative and engineering people on the planet, and then they'd bring them in. And then the new employee would say, "Wow, this is really cool. Well, you know what we should really do is this."
Yeah,
and then they wouldn't do it, and then they have them go do something that wasn't in their domain.
Well, it was. Right. I think that pattern's pretty common. Of like, I've kind of reached some sort of echelon in my current domain, and I'm looking for a new challenge. But the problem was this: like the expectation was, oh, they're going to bring all that with them. And then most people at that caliber are like, no, actually, I'm ready to try some new shit. So I'm happy to chat about it.
It was cool. It was cool in that every time it came up, I would definitely like do a brain dump on whoever was doing whatever it was and like try to steer them in the right way. And years later, when we did the indie grant program, actually, because I was so heavily involved in that, like anybody that was doing any sort of like little character stuff or smart UI or something like that, like I would dump a pile of goodness on them as well and give them a little bit of game AI to sort of jam into their, architectural app or whatever the hell it was, so that they had like just the tiniest bit of like goodness. So it came in handy a lot. It was sort of like my little secret, knife that I could whip out at any given moment and just sort of make things go away.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of which, knife, which is also a very small sword. You came in, and the very first thing you started doing when you came in is you bought a whole bunch of foam swords.
Well, hold on. He brought his.
Well, yes, I brought mine.
And he carried it regularly and swung it about regularly.
And I think was even accused of being threatening at one point.
Maybe. That's people that just
there was a moment, but I think it may have been vindictive. Yes.
But let's just so we paint a picture for everyone. It's a foam, but
like LARP weapon.
Yeah, like a semi-realistic but kind of cartoony proportioned foam sword. And
there's, if people haven't actually seen Brian in the wild, Brian is a triangular gentleman. He has and there you go, David. There's one triangle. If you you kind of have a physique about you, and so you walking in with long hair and this big giant physique and a sword was, I think it was an elixir to all of the devs and the people there. It was a wonderful little.
Well,
I was like, who the hell is that?
It was not long after he was there that I was in an office with our mutual friend Anne-Marie, where Brian's like putting in a requisition for 20 to 30 of these foam swords. It was like a big, and you were like, it's totally worth it. Trust me, I know it's crazy, but let's do it.
So here's what happened. I came in the office with mine that I had had for 5-6 years or something, and I was doing my thing, and very quickly, Jillian at the front desk, who became quite the character herself as far as Magic Leap was concerned, she said, "Where's mine?" And it never occurred to me. Nobody at Blizzard had ever asked for one. You know what I mean? Like it's so.
Oh, I thought it was a Blizzard artifact. It was your personal. I thought it was a swag from Blizzard.
No,
it was just yours.
Something.
Just your toy.
I started that. Yeah. And so, and so I thought about it. And I was like, okay, what do you know? So I went and I ordered 5 off of the site that I got mine from, and I brought them in, and I gave one to you, and I gave one to Sam, and I gave one to Jillian, and I gave one to, I think, Andy Lanning, and one to Graham, and then finally the last one I bought like kind of a nicer one, and the very first town hall with Roni, I brought it up and I gave one to Roni, right? The very next day, Hank, who's the chief operating officer, he comes up to me and says, "Where the hell's mine?" And so I was like, okay, this is a thing. And so then I went to Anne-Marie, who was kind of like in charge of the content group at that point. And so I asked her, I said, "Hey, can I have some, budget to do this?" And she was like, "Well, how much are these things?" And I told her, about how much it was, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, very shortly, I had like approximately $1,000 or $2,000 a year on my budget to buy foam swords. And over the course at Magic Leap, I probably gave out 700-800 swords.
Really?
Over the course
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
Wow, really?
I kept doing it. And like it became this like weird quest thing that they talked about during orientation, where they said, if you find the guy with the long hair, he will send you on a quest, and if you do the quest, you will get your sword. And so, anyways, I gave out hundreds of those things, man. And so, yeah,
that gives you some insight into some Magic Leap culture. That like your fun little sword thing turned into an official thing that then became an onboarding thing. So I did want to wind it back because like we talked about what we thought you might do at the company, but I think what you wound up doing was actually way more important. And from my perspective, what we had was we had these crazy teams. We had a computer vision team. We had a hardware team. We had different types of content teams, and one common need. Oh, we had an interaction design team, and they were thinking a lot about UI and stuff. And the one common thing that kept coming up was for us in the generic content group was like, the perception, or what we called the computer vision team, the perception team at the time. Perception team would say, hey, content people, make us a demo to test these new features. And we're like, what? How does, not sure what you need, or I'm not sure how we can service that request. And then you had like the interaction design team going, well, we've got ideas, but we don't know enough about Unity, or we've got one or two people on the team that sort of kind of know how to use it. And then this was the early days, and then the need just kept growing. So from my perspective, you really built out the team that serviced that, like, these are people that are somewhat multidisciplinary. We put together proofs, we test things out, and then we give feedback back based off that. Is that kind of fair to, and is that how it stayed, or did it evolve into more than that?
Well, I mean, so for a good, I would say 4.5, almost 5 years, we did just that. It was called the Interaction Lab, and we sat between, hardware and perception and the SDK group. And so we did first turn on of all the new features. We did exploration with all the new features and the inputs. We tried to get feedback on which input was crap and which input needed more data and which input needed to be above a certain threshold of refresh rate or whatever the hell it was. At the same time, we tried to help the SDK group come up with the API before they had to iterate on it 5 times. And then, like you say, we documented everything and tried to give some semblance of best practices or best known practices as best as we could. And then just tried to dump Unity code on anybody that wanted it so that everybody wasn't doing the same research over and over and over again. And we did that for 5 years. We must have pumped out 700-800 different prototypes. Wow. Everything from little afternoon prototypes to 2 or 3 month prototypes that were a whole experience, and we would then run a bunch of people through for focus group sort of work and all that stuff and gather data on it. It kind of culminated with, we did a product, if you want to call it that, for the launch, where we made a bunch of code sample projects called Magic Kit, and we put them out on the dev portal. And those were sort of kind of like a whole thought, a mixed reality entire thought, right? So it was a little bit more than a code snippet, where the SDK group was just doing reference snippets, and it was a little bit less than a game or an app. It was more you could jump into an RC car and drive on the wall, or you could these little snippets. It was also the source of the horrifyingly taken wrong little guy that would throw a rock at your head, right? Which was
right.
It got mismarketed, obviously, as some sort of demo by the marketing group, and it was no, this is a code sample, you clown. So this isn't anything. This is. So, anyways,
there was a little miscommunication around there.
That was the first and only time that ever happened.
Yeah. That was
that's an isolated incident.
We weren't used to that at all.
I loved that concept, and that was a little bit like when we remember at the very beginning when we were look, all you need to do is just have a cube on a table that throws a shadow that you can knock off with your hand. Like, let's just do that. Just this small little thing, and that's what you guys were doing. Or these little
pretty much
pieces. Like this is using environmental mesh. It's using hand tracking. It's using lighting. It's using all of the things, and it's just this simple little thing. Now you can take that little piece and go forth and make something cool with it.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing was like as simplistic as that little guy throwing a rock was, like that demo responds to gesture. The rock actually has fully spatialized audio by like one of the top 5 spatialized audio people on the entire planet. So it like whizzes past your head with like perfect spatialized audio. And like
name drop, please. Name drop.
Anastasia Devana.
Yeah.
Right?
Anastasia. Yeah. Thinking about having her on next.
She's amazing. Don't mess with her. And by the way, her name is pronounced Anastasia. And likewise, like it recognized spots on the floor and it like knew where to go next and all these. There was stuff in there. There was mixed reality stuff in there. And so, the last year after we finally shipped like our creator edition, they hired an actual chief product officer, Omar, and at that point, the Interaction Lab kind of shifted to become the proofing group for the entire product org. And so at that point, they kind of like we're still doing Interaction Lab stuff, except that it was more targeted towards the specific things that the product org wanted to investigate. And so that was the bulk of it. Now, at the same time, myself and Berkebile were still off in a corner just doing random sort of Interaction Lab stuff. I convinced Sam that needed to keep happening. And so Bob and I were just sort of still doing Interaction Lab the whole time. And believe it or not, out of all of the stuff that we built in Interaction Lab, that's where the vast majority of all of the stuff for the ML toolkit came out.
Yep.
So MLTK is basically Bob and I trying to empower a bunch of outside devs and inside teams that needed solutions really, really fast. Like now those were code snippets, right?
Yeah.
And also trying to do some advanced interaction work so that we could like raise the bar for some of the things like the hand stuff and other things. And Bob's a monster. You can't slow him down.
How many times did Bob go to the hospital during that time?
So I will tell you like while
he's amazing.
While I was Bob's manager, one of my claims to fame is that I managed to keep him out of the emergency room. Every other manager that he had while he was there, like at one point or another, he ended up with exhaustion.
I think but it wasn't because I drove him to exhaustion. He drove himself. That's the trick with Bob. It's not that
the trick.
You got to keep him from driving. Yeah, he drives himself to exhaustion.
Yes.
I got to call out. We have a massive lineup in the chat that I gotta acknowledge. We've got
Michael Keith,
MK
Ultra,
Tim McSweeney,
Ben Usinski's here.
Ben.
Oh my God.
Ben the Labrador Retriever, Usinski, James Everett. Josh is in here. Jimmy. The chat is full of New Zealand goodness.
There you go, Dan Kais.
Yep. Jurg's in here somewhere.
Tucker. I saw
Mike Tucker.
McSweeney's in there.
I banned Tim.
James Everett is in here.
Jorg's in there.
Yeah. We got
his Thor's mallet question.
We got the crew in. In addition to our normal peanut gallery, so we have our own. We got our own crew in here too. We got Estella, Cammie, and Eric in there. A bunch of others. So yeah, it's a good crew. So I'm sure they'll chime in on some of this stuff. So
that's awesome.
So like when
Usinski was Interaction Lab employee number 1.
Yep.
He was the first guy.
Well, he was one of the couple people on the design team that knew Unity. Like he was like the prototype of, hey, the design team needs some Unity people to work with to test out some of this stuff. And they made a lot of Tim McSweeney has defeated your ban and reappeared in the chat. I just want to call that out. He live or live.
I don't think you're gonna defeat him. He's one of the better programmers I've ever met.
Yeah.
So good luck.
So I was curious actually in the Interaction Lab, we had some stuff. We had some things that just as like old salty game devs where like some of the stuff is obvious to us and clearly other people in the company just don't have that background. And so some stuff was kind of low hanging fruit, easy swings, but like was there ever pieces of technology or things you had to figure out how to make interesting or fun that were a challenge, that where you're just like, I've never had to work with this stuff before, I don't know what this is gonna be?
Well, usually it was around trying to get away from stuff that you thought was going to be good, where you're like, why can't this feel right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like many times it was more just a question of like quickly trying all the things that you thought were going to work and discarding all of them.
What did you say? Fail fast?
Fail fast, right?
Yeah.
That's
oh,
the
you
thing.
didn't plan an entire fully shipped product around a feature? Oh, what you got? Oh,
I got the actual the Interaction Lab logo.
Hold on, I never got one of those.
So I made actual patches at one point for the Interaction Lab, and it says "fail fast" right in the middle.
Mine's in the box. I know it's somewhere.
I got a bunch. If you want,
I need a foam sword and a patch.
Dude, I need another sword.
You know what? I actually might have some foam swords in the garage. I probably had like 5 or 6 still in the box when we got boxed.
Was it all from the same? Were you just keeping this one foam sword company afloat with your?
No. So that particular company. There you go. Nice. That particular company. At some point, they reached out to me because I was doing so much business with them.
What the hell's wrong with you?
They ended up giving me a 30% across the board discount. I'm like one
You're
of their
wholesaling.
And it's this like crazy tiny little company in like Canada or something. I'm sure they're just like, oh, that guy, he ordered 17 more swords. That's awesome. And so, anyways, I definitely am there.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, so I wouldn't say it was more just that like it took a ton of iteration to really make things feel good. It was almost surprising like how many things that you would have expected to work out just didn't. And like there was some clear patterns. It was always like, okay, a lot of game devs start with like ton of pixels, and then you slowly melt away everything until you've just got like 6 freaking pixels, and that's doing everything, and you're like, this is awesome. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
that's the backwards way to do it, though.
Suddenly it's magical. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and it's like,
start with 6 pixels and then add pixels to it.
Yes, exactly. That's what you'd expect.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, this is some more inside baseball, but that was not the mutually agreed upon wisdom in the company always. Like there was a camp that was like, no, we start with Pixar and we try to figure out how to make that fully interactive.
No. So here's one thing that's funny.
Now that Unreal 5 is out, they win.
So here's one thing that's funny. When I first started, like I got told by a few people, like, Roni won't even look at this unless it's super pretty. And I was like, okay, if that's the case, then Roni's only getting cubes from now on. And so I started making all the guys make just cubes, and like Spencer hated me for a long time, and like the whole 9 yards. And like
I didn't hate you for that. I loved you.
one of the people in the chat right now, Mike Tucker, worked on something while he was in the Interaction Lab called Ilophone, which was literally just a geometric shape that like a bunch of them floating in the air, and if you looked at it with your eyes, it played a xylophone, and so it was called Ilophone, right?
Yep.
And that demo practically won us our round C funding. That crazy demo with just geometric shapes, and like it didn't take too many good, compelling interactions with almost no fidelity of art for Roni to just completely give up that notion that like that wasn't something he needed.
Well, and Ilophone was obviously building up on Mike's, like, we got to have Mike on because he's done some incredible stuff as well. But it's building upon his past experience with building visuals tied to audio and music.
Yeah.
But he was really pushing like, what could you do with these new interactions like eye tracking and spatialized audio? And don't you think it's fair to say that was kind of Tonandi eventually kind of blossomed out of that. So like,
absolutely,
it started as a proof, very simple. I think the other one was Ilophone. There was the one where the Beatles. I've talked about this on the show before.
Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds.
Yeah.
And so that was Steve. I actually asked Steve if he would basically make a symphony that like as you moved around and as you looked around, it would like change the different things instead of waiting for a symphony. because we were actually on the hook. We ended up getting a bunch of symphonic stems from somebody else.
A little bit more name dropping. Steve who?
Steve Mongiat?
Yeah. Okay, there we go. Everyone's looking for a job, man. We gotta pimp them as much as we can.
I was asking him to do a symphony, and we ended up getting a set of symphonic stems from like the London Orchestra or some shit. We had a guy over there that ended up dropping it, but Steve didn't wait. He ended up just like finding individual instruments for Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and he made that instead. And so that's what we ended up going forward with.
The coolest thing for me for that demo was the spatialized audio, and he had each track represented by a visual object, and it was spaced out enough to where you could walk up to an individual object, turn your ear to it, and hear very clearly that one track. That was the cool part. Like you were basically, you could navigate music while it was playing, was like the cool revelation there.
Yeah, at some point, Dave Shumway ended up doing the full orchestral layout, and he had like you could walk around in it, and he had it like, it was probably in a 10x10 space, except that he made the distances way bigger in the spatialized audio part. And so like you would walk around and just like same thing, you would get your ear down by the piccolo, and you would just hear it was beautiful. It was just like walking around in like this like ghostly symphony. It was great.
It makes you wonder about all the stuff in the can that will never see the light of day.
Oh my God, right? I mean, there's so much that the creative side of Magic Leap did. And,
when you have Anastasia on next week, please get her to talk at length about the lightsaber demo that we did with her.
Okay.
And so McCall and her and I think it was Shipes did the lightsaber demo where McCall, because he was like the DJ mixer guy from the 90s or whatever, he hooked up a way. He had like, I want to say like 17 or 18 different basically DJ knobs hooked up to different parts of, like, one was hooked up to the angular velocity at the hand point of the controller, and one was like, several different velocity vectors that had to do with like their proximity to your face, and then there was a few other ones, and then there was two different sound sources on the demo where like one was by your hand and the other one went up and down, again based on like how close you were moving and how fast it was going. Anyways, so then Anastasia and Brett spent, I don't know, 2 months basically making a procedural system that would generate the lightsaber sound based on velocity and movement and all of these crazy variables. And when we actually had ILM come in and try it, they said that it was the most realistic procedural lightsaber demo that they had ever seen. And they had been trying to do it for approximately 20 years, and they never actually got it. Like, every single lightsaber sound that you hear in a Star Wars movie is custom handmade. It is in no way procedural aided.
Wow.
Right.
And so...
Well, so one of the things that I think this is bringing up for me is that there's a lot of... there was just recently a pretty gnarly takedown of Magic Leap and what's his name, who hated us forever.
Carl.
Yeah.
Carl. And here's what I would say to Carl. I actually love Carl.
Wait.
I actually love Carl.
Okay, and I
love it. This is like Crossfire all of a sudden.
What I'm trying to say though is that there have been a lot of takedowns of the company in general, and very few reports on the incredible value and output of the creative side of Magic Leap. And I think that the creative side of Magic Leap was absolutely one of the best I've ever seen in my life. I mean, just absolutely incredible. And all of the stuff that you're talking about right now is proof that that team, that whole side of Magic Leap, I think had so much value. And
well, I definitely want Brian to like look directly in the camera and talk to Karl Guttag, but I do want to say like after years and years of like, I've always been the most engaged online. Like, I got in trouble for tweeting and posting on Reddit and stuff. Like, having both been associated directly with the company, being a part of the company, and now having been pretty distant from the company for some time, except for my dear friends that work there. There are very obviously haters, magically pessimist. In my estimation, most of them are either talking about the amount of money that was raised or the marketing blunders, and they never see that part of it, Spencer, that you're talking about, because we were behind the scenes and those people weren't really ever pushed into the spotlight. It was always the funding or the marketing, hype stuff. And so those people never will have the full story. And that's kind of a cool reason to have this show, to be able to talk about some of this stuff. But anyway, go ahead, Brian. Yeah. What do you have to say to Karl Guttag?
So anyways, I'm actually a huge fan of Karl because he's very, very calm and knowledgeable and just does his job amazingly well. He's a consummate engineer in his domain, and like everything he says about the optics is 100% right. Like I always loved when like somebody would Photoshop a reflection over the top of the lens so that they couldn't see the optics inside, and it didn't matter anyway. Karl would do the math and he would say, this is what their FOV is. Those guys are jerks. And I always just laughed. I was like, maybe, just maybe our marketing department will get a little bit more humble if he keeps doing that. So I was always a rooter, right? What's interesting, the thing that I would tell Karl, if I ever met him, I'm hoping that someday I can give the guy a hug, right? Yes, there he is.
Is that him?
Yeah, I would assume that's Karl Guttag, right?
Nice.
What I would say to Karl is that like, and believe it or not, this was a faux pas even inside the house of Magic Leap. Too many people got caught up in the fact that like our device was a display, and it really wasn't. I would say that it's partially a display, but what really actually makes a wearable spatial computer important and good is not the display. It's the fact that I can display pixels where I want, but that I also have these inputs and that I also have these other things. Like it's about the holistic integration with the human as a wearable and all of that. And yeah, like if you compare us with something that's completely optimized for screen-based content, yeah, shockingly, we're not quite gonna match. I wouldn't expect it to, but like, I believe it or not, when we were going to ship the Creator Edition, I actually asked our marketing department. I said, "This is what I want you to do. I want you to invite Karl to come into the office, and like he'll come because he wants to bring all comers. He's like, go ahead. I'll come to Florida and I'll kick your asses in Florida." I just knew at some level that like I was summoning my inner Karl, right? And I said, bring him here, put him in the executive boardroom, put a Magic Leap in front of him, and then give him a set of tools and leave the room and just say, do whatever you want. And what I wanted him to do was do the teardown in our office. That was actually my request, was like, let Karl Guttag tear it down in the office. And like, they thought about it for a good couple of weeks. They were like, man, like, should we? And I was like, you should. You would actually make Karl potentially actually respect you. Just the tiniest bit.
Yeah. So just so everyone knows, I'm going to bring up his website here. He is all business. So it's Karl Guttag. So he is, I don't know if he's formally trained in optics, but he can take any video or screenshot, and he will literally take samples of anything and figure out like chromatic aberration and what that means for waveguides and all these things. Right. And he has always been down on Magic Leap, if for no other reason than he felt like that they had misrepresented or not talked directly to. So he does these crazy in-depth dives on things, and it's here. I didn't even know he put. Oh, is this the big takedown one that everybody's talking about? I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
So
this morning or yesterday.
So but this kind of brings up my point. Like, still, like the big gripe is that Magic Leap raised so much money, right? Which I'm like, anybody that knows about everything that has to be done with this stuff knows that sure, the money could have maybe been spent more efficiently, but it does take a lot of money to do this stuff.
But let's be honest. When it comes to hardware, that's actually not that much.
No, yeah.
Like when I was working at PlayStation and Xbox, the Xbox came out. Microsoft spent $2.5 billion in marketing the year that they released the Xbox. Just in marketing,
right?
Had nothing to do with the actual development of the product.
Well,
just in marketing.
Not only hardware, but content is so expensive. So like I was just reading this morning that new app QB, which is just doing like bite-sized video. They raised $2 billion, and 500 million of it was for marketing, and 500 million of it was for content. Like it's like the two most expensive things you can do is build high quality interactive content and hardware, and you're doing it all at one company. Plus you're building the operating system, the optics, like arguably building too much, but
it was somewhat humorous at GDC. Every once in a while, somebody would ask me like, why is it taking so much time and why is it costing so much money? And I remember saying at one point, like, hey, we worked on StarCraft 3 for 8 years.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like so the fact that like we miniaturized something that was roughly the size of a Volkswagen Bug to fit on your face and built 600,000 square feet of production line, half in America and half in Mexico. Like that's pretty good for 5 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's a pretty good effort.
I'm sorry we didn't build your spatially aware eye tracking 6-DoF face computer fast enough. Well, I make this point often on this show where because I'm on the other end of it too, where we've experimented and focused a lot on mobile AR because I'm like, the best device is the one you have, and you have a lot of people that are like, our expectations are just so out of calibration, and people are like, well, there's nothing useful about having AR on a phone. I'm just going to wait for glasses. It's just it's there's always going to be haters. I've learned a lot about like Magic Leap was a good time for me to like be a part of this company that got because before that, startups I'd worked with before, when you're on the kind of lower tier of tech startups, you're just like, oh man, if I could just get that TechCrunch article, we would just go through the roof, and then you go to a company like Magic Leap where we're actively turning away that type of exposure. And when you do get it, you're like, you know what? It doesn't really make a difference. Like so there's always going to be people that like love you and hate you if you're doing something interesting.
No, I mean, if nobody hates you, you're not doing anything passionate. You know what I mean? You're not doing anything very strongly if nobody hates you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brian, I just want you can see Paul's desktop, so you know what's coming next. So,
are we prepared to talk about this?
That's fine. Let's do it.
Here we go. Because we teased it on Twitter. I actually don't know anything about this. Other than it's nightmare fuel.
So yes, it is quite. So here's the scoop there. So I worked at Blizzard Entertainment for just shy of 5 years before I came to Magic Leap, and I was the gameplay and AI guy for all of Hearthstone. Hearthstone, I don't know if you guys knew this, was an experiment by Blizzard to see if we could make a Blizzard quality product with a tiny team. There was only 11 people on that dev team until we started breaking out and doing the iPod or iPad SKU and some other stuff. It was 11 people, right, and 5 programmers, and I was the gameplay and AI guy. And so, while I was there, one of the guys that I knew in the cinematics department had come over and was like, Brian, we were talking about investigating, under the skin muscle deformation techniques, right? And they wanted data, and they wanted reference material, and they did whatever. They said, and we were wondering if you could help us out with a bunch of scans. And I was like, fine, I don't care. And this isn't the first time this happened. When I worked at DreamWorks, they scanned me. I was actually the the body model for the Germans in the Medal of Honor game that I built, and so like I've killed myself millions of times, right? This is one of the reasons why I don't care is just simply because I've just killed myself, right? And so this has been done before, and so like they sent me to LA and they did these ultra high def scans where I was doing all these crazy things because they very specifically wanted muscle movement like while the scan was happening so that they could get the actual like tendons and crazy shit happening. And so they would like they'd scan me. They had this like crazy laser scan that would just go, and it would take 20 seconds to take a scan. And they would say stand there and grab that bag, and I go, okay. Now like they're like, now pick it up 7 inches, and this is a 200-pound sandbag, and I pick it up, and they're like, freeze, and they do another scan, and they're like, now pick it up another 4 inches and lean back just a tiny bit, freeze. So over the course of the day, I had what I would go so far as to say is the hardest workout of my entire life. And they had like ultra high res crazy ass scans of me doing all this shit. And they ended up using me. They ended up using not only that, but they used the skin. They did they wanted my skin as well. And the reason they wanted my skin
we need
is
your
because
skin.
we need your skin. They ended up taking my skin and heavily doctoring it, obviously, and then I was the new orc skin texture when they went to it was right around the time when they did the movie. So I forget which 2014. I forget which expansion came out in 2014, and they also ended up using the textures in the movie as well, right? And so this particular image was actually just a single face shot, and they wanted me to like do as extreme of face movements as they could, so that again they could get like wrinkles and like all the ligature
Actually,
and neck and everything.
I'm going to stop you right there. This is actually not. It wasn't just an image. I have this full 3D model.
Yes, and, this is a 3D model.
And I will give it back to you.
Because for some stupid reason, I showed Spencer all of this at one point, and and then walked away from my desk like a fool.
No, you handed me this. I figure we're far away out from 2014 sure. At this point, where we're okay.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a statute of limitations or something like that.
So yeah, this was all part of a huge data set that Blizzard collected so that they had realistic, textures and animation stuff and a bunch of data for orc, orc musculature, if you can believe that.
It's a fantastic scan. It is absolutely. It's one of my favorite 3D model scans. It's just it's fantastic.
Top notch. Top notch.
There you go.
My gosh.
So let's speaking of games and high poly models, Unreal Engine 5.
Yeah, so I want to apologize. So thankfully the chat let us know, because we haven't done a bunch of screen sharing since we kind of switched up our audio setup a little bit, and I had a little boo-boo with when I do the screen share, it was piping system audio through twice. So we now should no longer have the echo, so now I can bring up some stuff. Oh, actually, I'll save that for later. Yeah, so the big chatter on Twitter today, at least in a lot of circles, was Unreal Engine 5 got announced. It's doing they've got a new system. They're using a called Nanite that's doing virtualized geometry. And
hold on, Brian, what are you doing, man?
Brian is Spencering right now.
He's totally Spencering.
Wait, hold on. Just real quick, non sequitur. Let's see your shirt real quick, Brian. So
What's that?
Can you stand up for a sec so we can see your shirt?
Oh yeah.
There we go.
Can you see it?
Yes.
That's it. Don't go any further.
We don't. That's good. Yeah, so this is Unreal Engine 5 got announced today. They did a very big demo on PlayStation 5. I'm going to not play the audio. The crazy part is they're basically using archival levels of geometry and rendering it in real time. To me, the part where I literally LOL'd was when they show the wireframe view of the scene.
And it just looks like noise.
This is it. Yeah. Yeah. This is the wireframe views. This is no texturing. And that's how dense it is. And they actually talk about, so Spencer, I don't know how much you got to check it out, but like the reason why I raised it up to you was they actually talk about using these statues and stuff are actual photogrammetry scans, or they at least started from scans. And
they're basically not doing any real-time 3D artist tricks on the way in. They're just using the straight up photogrammetry. Now, of course, it's going to be somewhat cleaned, but it's going to be, it's still super, super high res. And one of my concerns about concerns, maybe this could probably be an unpopular take, but I was talking about Brian about this when we were in kind of the green room beforehand. It's that this is technology driven. And yes, you can put your art into this scene, and you can put your art into this engine, and it will render it. And you can do all sorts of much more high-level stuff as an artist without having to learn all the low-level stuff. And what I am seeing kind of as a parallel is the advent of clip art and stock photo for Photoshop back in the day, right? And I'm seeing this more and more. Like I was just watching a YouTube video of one of the artists that I follow, who I can't remember his name. He's really freaking good, and I love his artwork. But how he builds his art is he builds it by kit bashing, and so he takes art that either he's made or someone else has made through through laborious processes of hard modeling and making all this stuff, and then he just sticks things together, and he puts them together into a pleasing shape, and he gets them all into the thing. And maybe I'm old or old school,
yes,
but there's okay, shut up. But both there it feels to me like we are heading into, with this UE5 ability to take in billions of polygons, kind of a sloppiness, and not really a you don't agree?
No. I mean, like, look, the Unity Asset Store has been around long enough to where this has already been possible to build. I mean, there are shipped mobile games I've seen that are using Asset Store purchase things, and ultimately. So two things. First of all, sometimes consumers just don't care, and
absolutely.
So what?
They almost never care.
Yeah, they really don't.
I mean, to be brutally kind of like sideways, like this is the exact thing that a lot of people, Spencer, have said about like Java and C#, is that, it's going to make you a shittier programmer because you don't know what's going on under the hood, and you don't know memory management, and you don't know these things.
You're not programming in assembly.
But and I would say that like in some circumstances that may be true, but those circumstances are getting shoved into a corner and put under a rug very frequently. So
and the other thing I would say is there will always be people that want to push the state of the art, and they won't so basically. This allows more people to focus on unique experiences without getting bogged down. Maybe. I'm still not convinced that you just drop any old giant model in and it just works. But the other part of it is,
remember too that that photogrammetry of that statue, for example, that was not just scanned and thrown in.
Yeah.
That was scanned and smoothed and probably retopoed and retextured. So it's an asset. It may be a ginormous asset, but it's still an asset.
And by the way,
spend some time on.
We talked about earlier, as far as demos go, that was not a slap together demo. That is somebody was working till 10 o'clock last night to get that. Like Like, I mean, it was, that is everything. That is its best foot forward. And like,
well, that's millions of dollars of effort.
Yeah. So I don't think, first of all, is it really a bad thing that anybody could do that? I just don't think it's possible though. And it's almost like saying, oh my God, iPhones have such amazing cameras now. What will feature filmmakers do? It's like,
So here's the thing that I would say, Spence, and it's sort of the same thing with like Unity and Unreal in general, which is that, when we all started in games, you had to be a very low level programmer and a very amazing artist so that you could optimize. The original Lara Croft had 140 polygons or some shit, right? Like, and she barely looked human, but she still looked like a lady. You know what I mean? And like, and the point is that like you had to be really, really amazing at your craft to even make a game. I actually kind of love the fact that we've gotten to a point with our technology where just anybody, even if they're not optimizing and doing any of this, they can just throw something in and I can hear that person's story. I can feel that person's emotions coming across on the screen. Yeah, it might not be the greatest, or it might not, or it might be. Mm-hmm. And like they might never have ever made a game if it wasn't this sort of dump it in there and just try it. You know what I mean? Like, and so for me, it allows a lot more people to get into the medium that I love the most, which is interactive. Okay. And that to me it's important.
And I think that also on another positive note of this news, that this will trickle down into mobile, and this will trickle down into AR. And so, at what point are we going to start seeing the effects of that technology advancement, like come down into this? Right?
So Fortnite has already said they're going to start transitioning to Unreal 5. I exclusively play Fortnite on iPad. Like the iPad is an incredible gaming console for somebody that doesn't want to hook up to a TV, and so they're definitely like
I'm on an iPad Pro right now.
Yeah, I mean mobile is just like, it's really funny to see Unreal has kind of backdoored into mobile, right? Unity, so I was using Unity when it was Mac and PC only, and like they struck gold when they said, nope, we're going to make sure this runs on the new iPhone. And all of a sudden, a bunch of game devs could tap into this huge community of people that were desperately seeking good interactive content for their very fancy new phones. So for a long time, the conventional wisdom has been Unreal is visual fidelity for PC games and Unity is your mobile workflow. And they've kind of backdoored. I mean, Fortnite works really well on iPad, and I see a lot of people I play with online are on Switch. And so now, where they have not really publicly dipped their toe in any waters is AR. I think there are a lot of people building PC VR stuff with Unreal, but I think they can just afford to wait it out. Is what it boils. They have no financial or otherwise motivation to sink any time into AR yet. But I think you're right, Spencer. Like I do think this shows this, and the other thing, we didn't talk about it last week. We had Graham on, so we just kind of completely did away with any kind of news talk. But there was some talk around HoloLens supporting cloud-based rendering, and so now you can render these multi-million triangle. We were promised to say triangle a lot.
Say triangle. Oh yeah, say triangle a couple more
multi-million triangle scenes on HoloLens too, which is not capable of doing it like natively, right? So you do it on the cloud side. I mean, it all, as far as this being XR talk, this is all stuff is certainly relevant. But I'm also not salty because the Unreal 5 announcement didn't say anything about, as far as I know, I didn't actually see the full announcement. But they don't need to, right? They're pushing the bound. I mean, they demoed it on a PlayStation 5. It's like that's their focus.
Right. And that's out this year, right?
Should be in the fall. Yep.
Yeah, because my daughter stole my 4.
Well, I wish I'd have known. I would have given you my 4 because I'm playing Fortnite on my iPad. But then there is some chatter around PlayStation VR 2, which might be a little bit more hopefully along the lines of Quest in terms of maybe wireless and 6DoF-ish. I don't know. We'll see.
To be honest, like actually, one of my prophecies is that Sony's going to be the one that does a pass through first in the home, because they love to take a new thing that's a little bit of a risk and use their next platform to sell it, right? And so like the Blu-ray player was one of the PlayStations, and then they keep kind of using the PlayStation to sell whatever it is that they need sold, and like the VR was the best-selling VR helmet for quite some time, because they basically used the PlayStation. It was just a sweetener for the PlayStation, right? And like it worked. It did really, really well. And so, as far as I'm concerned, like you have one of the better consumer electronics companies in the world. They know how to make stuff that people can put on their head and like survive. They already have a huge audience that's going to buy a PlayStation 5. And if somebody said, oh, you know what, we should stick one of these things and into a PlayStation 5, I guarantee you it would probably take off. And like in people's homes, people are willing to look a little stupid. And so like it doesn't need to have the perfect form factor to go into the subway or something. And so my guess, that's actually my prophecy, is that Sony's probably going to be one of the ones that does a first mass market AR thing.
Yeah.
But it'll be pass-through video AR.
Probably.
I do think there's a wave of pass-through video AR coming over the next year or two.
So because Snapchat is a thing, everybody expects it to kind of look like that. And that's the only way you can do that, is pass through a video that you've edited over the top, so that you can have completely opaque pixels in the whole 9 yards. And so like it wouldn't, that's what everybody's expecting.
Yeah, it reminded me of another kind of Magic Leap story that I like to tell to try to get people to realize the challenges of optical view through. So just so everybody knows, like HoloLens and Magic Leap, you're looking at the real world, you're getting the real world photons in your eyeballs, and then we're trying to calibrate and layer synthetic photons on top of that. So we've got to show you something as responsive, hopefully, as your brain is processing the real world, as opposed to video AR, where you're looking at a screen, which is a video feed, which is probably lagging behind reality ever so slightly. But the advantage to it is it's opaque, and the same data set you're using to do all this tracking is the same thing you're presenting to the user. So you can perfectly stick things. So my favorite example of that was in the early days of Magic Leap, when the perception team was working on fingertip tracking before we had full hand tracking. And their proof was a video feed on a desktop computer. And it was like, look, I can wag my finger as fast as possible, and this little red dot is superimposed upon the video. I can't shake the red dot off my finger. And it's like, well, because the code that is, calculating your fingertip is using the same video frame that you're also presenting to the user. And so for a while, like a few weeks, it was like, oh man, finger tracking is just working so rock solid. And then we put it on a wearable with a optical view through, and it lagged behind your finger by like not even a frame. It was like many frames. It was like swimming around, And
well, that's what we made the glow spot bigger and bigger.
Yeah,
so
you just made
finger as it moved.
Just made the spot bigger. That's how you fix it. But that's like, to me, that's like a perfect explanation of like why this optical view through is the hardest problem to solve. You're using sensors to quickly calculate what you can about the physical world, and then fast enough for you to actually render some sort of synthetic visual feedback on top of that. And a lot of people don't get, you may hear the term motion to photon latency thrown around. And I mean, that's a part of it. But like a lot of people don't understand, like, oh, well, when I look on Snapchat, it's perfectly snapping a mask to my face and I move around. I can't shake it. And it's like, Well, the video is the data set that it's working off of.
Yeah. It's taking a set of pixels, it's overlaying additional pixels over the top of that and giving it to you.
Yeah, and
Done.
then you're seeing it all squished together.
Right, and the way to test that is to look at your Snapchat filter and then move it quickly, and then also look at what you're looking at. And you can see you move. You know, I mean, there's a lag.
Yeah,
right.
That's why these are hard problems, you know, and so that's the battle we've always had to fight is, you know, the expectations, because we're comparing apples to oranges in some cases, and you know, you could also make the argument like, who cares? Like, you know, it's what the consumer wants. So,
there are so many challenges in AR. Like in getting people to understand what AR are. I mean, like we just did one last week with a client of ours where they were concerned that if they got right up next to the character, they could see the texels in the texture map, and there's, you know, I'm actually working on it right now. There's an explainer I'm trying to work on about like how in video games. You have bounds within the video game world that your character cannot go. Therefore, your camera can't go any further either. So things that are far away, like trees and the mountains and the buildings off in the far city, those can all be low resolution, and you never have to worry about the character getting right up close on them and making them look crappy. But in AR, you have a character that you can put an 8K texture on, and you make them 6 feet tall, and you get right up to their nose and you can see the pixels. And so there's this it's just inherently, well, unless of course you're using whatever we're calling what's the new Unreal
Nanite
texture engine, Nanite. Or you know, like they're currently for the type of technology that we use for our clients, there really isn't the ability to increase that texture map to a 16K or 32K texture on the fly. You know, so like it's interesting the things that come up that I never had to really think about before. Now that we're in augmented reality, we have to think about these
now things. That the Yahoo can move and look anywhere they want.
Just don't do that.
Well, so and we're really bad YouTubers, so we have not plugged the channel at all. But obviously, we'd love you to like, subscribe. But I was gonna say in our Discord chat, I posted a little Twitter thread. Like, you know, speaking of Nanite, like. The person that's presenting it, the engineer that's presenting it in the video, he's been working on the solution that has become Nanite for over 10 years. And for the past 3 years, like as like a research thing, and for the past 3 years, he's been working on it full time within Epic with a full team of people. And it's just now coming to surface. Like, again, it goes, you know, the time and expense.
I haven't actually dug into the tech. Is it using like a point cloud renderer? Is it starting from a signed distance field like the Sony Dreams renderer that they use on that thing?
No, it is an alternative thing. See, Josh is in the chat, and I'm afraid to say anything because he's just gonna smack me down. Like, well, he's just gonna get me. But
Josh, bust him.
It's in the Discord chat. It's called Geometry. I don't want to mess it up. I was trying to look real quick. It's a technology called Geometry. I want to say Patches, but I don't know if that's correct.
It's not a hop based technology, and so Paul doesn't have the full full spectrum of knowledge.
Oh man, I'm just looking it up real quick. So the thread that I linked to in the chat goes back to his 2009 blog post where he started talking about it. Subdivision surfaces with displacement maps. I mean, it's like.
So is it like a signed distance field? Is it a point cloud that then gets?
I don't think
like
so.
LOD'd in real time.
My guess is that he's doing essentially like what Simplicon did, which is sort of like real time subdivision and recombination. So he's essentially doing like a procedural decimation.
Geometry images. That's the term I was looking for. It was originally a way to compress and so they've figured out a way to do it in real time. and like the real fun, it's really worth watching the video of the Unreal announcement, because this is literally his life's work, and he's getting to present it as like the crown jewel of Unreal Engine. And you can hear him like, he's obviously reading, like, it's already been planned out and everything, but there's moments like when
he's reading marketing stuff.
No,
right?
well,
So
but he is, but then there's points where you can hear the braggadocio, and like there's when the character walks into the room of statues, and he's like, "That's hundreds of billions of triangles." You're just like, you go, man, you did it, you hit the mountaintop. That's right. Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Oh, yeah.
It's freaking impressive. It really is. And the lighting, the relighting, the real time.
You mean Lumen?
Stuff is just Lumen. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Oh no.
Is it really?
Yeah, Lumen with an E. Lume.
Lumine.
Yep.
But it's really, really impressive. I mean, like cracking open the holes in the roof, and all of a sudden everything is just lit perfectly. It's just it is beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I did have one more goofy thing to share, because I think a lot of people are here from goofy Magic Leap stories. So
yeah, and there's so many triangles inside that demo too.
Sure,
so many.
So it came out over the week. So if anybody watched Tiger King, Brian, did you watch Tiger King, the Netflix
I
thing?
did not.
I did not either.
There's a woman in the documentary named Carol Baskin.
Oh yeah.
She's the one that killed him, right, or something.
Yeah, so the big controversy is, did she kill her husband or not? So it turns
the answer
out
is yes.
They surface some of the Magic Leap people. So this has been confirmed. Not only was this posted, but Alexis Coleman actually gave Carol Baskin her Magic Leap demo. So we know for a fact she got a pre-release demo. And so she, or not pre-release, it was in 2019. So she's known for wearing a little crown of flowers. And so she reached out to Magic Leap after she got her demo in Tampa and said, "Hey, I was curious if I could still wear my like lei of flowers with my headset." And like this was like a year before she became like this huge, and it's so goofy, but it's like such a Magic Leap thing. Like it's like it's like so funny. Like
I mean, we had so many crazy people come into the office. I mean, we were just in the office one day, and Kevin Spacey was walking by.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And he just walked in. He saw Magic Leap. He didn't even have an appointment. He walked in and he said,
"Oh my God, really?"
He said, He said, "Hello, I'm Kevin Spacey, and I would like a demo."
Yeah.
And they just fucking wheeled him in the back and gave him a demo.
My story. So
he was a little bit drunk, wasn't he?
No.
He was in the Dakota, and he was just walking through. Like,
I gave him the benchtop demo. So my story with the Kevin Spacey visit was we had all kinds of crazy people come through, and I'm like, whatever, we try to make it a comfortable environment for people. We don't want people to feel like they're being paparazzi'd or anything like that. And so we've had we've met a lot of really interesting people, but I knew he was coming in that day, and I was going to be on the demo circuit for him. And I told my wife, I was like, I'm taking a picture. Like, I know it's it's company policy to never ask, to not make them feel uncomfortable, but I'm like, I'm getting a picture. Like, and we had so many people coming through. I remember the day I was sitting at my desk, or my hallway desk, and in the same day we saw George Lucas and Steven Spielberg like come through the office. But for Kevin Spacey, because like House of Cards had happened, this was before he got in trouble, and we knew some of his backstory, but I was like, I'm breaking the rule for this one. And then it just so happened the former CMO very explicitly sent out an email that morning that was like, just a reminder that we have this very strict policy. And I'm like, damn it. Now I was going to get away with like, well, we haven't talked about the policy in a while, and I'm going to get a picture. But no, the other part of that was he's the one that when he sat down with Jeff Shue's team and they kept talking about Bob Gross, and they were like, he was like, who's this Bob guy? Like, everybody keeps talking about Bob, and they're like, oh, he works remotely. And so he said, well, I got to meet Bob. Everybody keeps talking about what Bob's done. So they call Bob like scripted, no heads up. They call Bob on Skype or whatever, Hangouts. And Bob's like, yeah. And they're like, somebody wants to talk to you, Bob. And he's like, okay. And it's Kevin Spacey. And he goes, are you Bob? Are you this Bob they keep talking about? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, he was like, well, you're not here. And they keep talking about it. So fuck you, Bob. And then just hangs up. And Bob didn't know it was coming, didn't know it was happening. So that's one of the celebrity stories. Yeah. I got a bunch.
I'm pretty sure the moment that I kind of like won Roni over, because I'd only been with the company for maybe 6 or 7 months, and I sat in the very middle of the room because I didn't really have a desk. So I stole Sam's desk, right? I was sitting at his desk for forever, and that was right in the middle of the room. It was right where they had the demo machine, and so I was sitting at my desk doing something probably on Monsters, right, with Spencer, right, and
so we were still in Santa Cruz then.
And that was, you were still in Santa Cruz, and that was when Spielberg and crew came through for the first time. But the thing is that like 17 years earlier, I had worked at DreamWorks Interactive on, like I said, on the Medal of Honor game, right? Mm-hmm. And so he comes in, and I'm like, because I was the gameplay and AI guy on Medal of Honor 2, the French Resistance one, right? Anyways, and so he would come into the office every month and spend 3 hours in my office, and we would do month after month after month after month for a year, right? And so anyways, he comes in, he's doing his demo, and I'm not saying anything. I'm just sitting at my desk like watching, and he does this little demo, and then he kind of skitters off to the side while the rest of the entourage is doing their demos, and he's looking around because we have all this crazy stuff in the office, and he looks over and he sees me sitting there with this silly grin on my face, and he kind of like, and this is Spielberg, right? Like all beard and hat and the whole night. And he's just like, doing this at me, and I'm not giving him anything. I'm just sitting there grinning. And he goes, Medal of Honor, right? He goes, Medal of Honor? And I go, yeah. And I go over, and he comes over, and he shakes my hand, and he goes, Brad. Like he got that close.
That's good.
He said Brad, and I was like Brian, and he goes, I knew it was something, and so he gives me a little hug and like whatever, and I look over, and Roni is sitting kitty corner from us, and he's just like jaw about down to here. He's just like, what the F is happening? My hero is hugging this silly programmer that I hired that like walks around with a foam weapon. What the hell is this happening right now? And so I'm pretty sure that was the day. That was the day that I think Roni like said, "You win. You win this round."
What was that was the Saving Private Ryan tie-in? Like, what was the?
Yeah, Medal of Honor. It was the first one was very similar. Like there was a beach on Normandy scene.
That's what I thought.
Did the whole thing.
Yep.
That was that game. It was on the original PlayStation. I mean, I think they're still making Medal of Honor games. Yeah. Still.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the thing.
Well, good job, Brad.
Yeah, you bet.
A lesser person might have been like, "Yes, sir, Brad. That's right."
No way, man. But I mean, we had so many random people in there. You know what I mean? Like I got told by Skrillex that our stuff sucked. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I had Ben in the chat right now gave a drawing demo to Shirley, the lead singer of Garbage. You know what I mean?
Well,
just
she's my Steven Spielberg story, because she had come in. So like, since you brought it up, they'd been to the office many times at that point, and they basically would hang out often. And so my big celebrity claim to fame was she basically got to know me through meetings and stuff. So then at one point she comes into the Dakota and like sees me across the room and calls me over to say hello. And I was like, oh, cool. Yeah, I guess we're friendly like that. But, never talked to her after match leave. But it is funny. Like, I mean, I think my very first encounter was I was still new to the company. Sam was still giving demos. It was the Mick and Sam show for demos. And
yeah.
And so I was and they were still doing demos in the old dentist office space. And I was asked to occupy someone while they were waiting for their turn to get the demo, and it turned out to be Ryan Philippe.
Oh,
and
nice.
and so he came out of the demo, and he was waiting on his crew to finish getting demos. And I'm like, what'd you think? You know, and I talked about like things we're trying to do and it was just really in those moments, you're not even thinking about who you're talking to. You're really just trying to support the mission of like keeping everyone hosted and entertained. And you're just kind of like, you know, like, and again, I also knew I wasn't going to be asking anyone for a photo or autograph or anything like that. So you're not like, you're just trying to talk to them as people. The weird ones were the ones we had to work with as coworkers.
Yeah.
Which some of them I won't name.
I felt really bad for Neil Stevenson at our $1 million launch party that we had at the W, because he was sitting there kind of away from everyone else. Everyone's getting hammered and dancing, and there's a lot of bunch of music, and there's Neil Stevenson, and he's kind of like sitting on a kind of up against a planter wall, and he's just kind of looking around and
in his tactical vest.
All of his pockets.
But then if you look a little bit further out, like maybe like 10 or 15 meters away from Neil, there's these little clusters of geeks. And they're talking to each other, and then one of them will furtively like walk over and be like, "Hey, so blah blah blah," and then he was, yeah, hi, and then they would like super fanboy on him. He'd be like,
"Yeah, he's pretty stoic." We should have him on. I think we could have him on too. Like he is like, I would say he is like one of the most well-known people that we stayed in touch after. And obviously we went to our friend Michael Green's wedding, and he was there. Like, I think we should have him on too. Like, he's got some pretty interesting, I think actually him and Brian have a lot in common, where they're kind of no bullshit, like, tell it like it is, which is good. Yeah.
So Brian, what's next after Magic Leap? You're a free agent.
I have no idea.
The plan?
It's been very interesting for me, because like it's tough for me to think about going and getting just like a regular game job, right? And I'm like staring
after that. Oh my
staring
God.
at this screen and just going like, yeah, this is a screen. This is a thing, right?
Yeah.
So there's that problem. But then there's the other problem, which is like, over the course of the month that I've been talking to people after Magic Leap, I've probably talked to like 20 different companies, and some of them will tell you that they're in XR, and some of them will tell you that they're spatial computing, and some of them will tell you blah 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 blah. But like, there's this horrifying realization that because we were so out on the edge, that like we're sort of like from the future.
Oh,
and
no.
So like when
we talk about this all the time.
When these other companies talk to us, it's sort of like, I'm like, oh, you're in the Bronze Age. And then the next time I'll talk to somebody, I'm like, oh, yeah, you just discovered electricity. And then the next time I talk to somebody else, I'm like, yeah, you've actually managed to get to the pre-industrial society. And then finally I'll talk to somebody and I'll be like, no, you're banging rocks together, man. You haven't even made fire.
Yeah.
You've got like so far to go.
But everyone's got that XR tag next to their
totally.
Right? Yeah.
And the funny thing is like, I've actually started to take on, and it's funny. I talked about this just a few days ago with Graham, believe it or not, where I said I have started to use what I call the prime directive, like it's a Star Trek thing. Like, I honestly feel like I'm from the future and I shouldn't mess with the developing civilizations, right? And so like, I don't
mess them up, right?
I don't mess them up. Like, I don't want somebody to tell me about that they just invented electricity, and I'm like, yeah, but have you checked out teleporters? You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to discourage anybody. And so I've gotten into this weird habit of like just going, instead of talking about the cool shit, I talk about the stuff that's like right in front of the shit that they just mentioned.
Yep, that is a very real.
So you don't sound like a crazy person, too.
So you don't sound like a crazy person.
When
they're like, well, that's not possible. Like,
when I first got out, and moved to Portland, I did presentations about like, I've returned from the future, and I didn't really talk about the way things are going to be or way things will be. I talked about kind of my progression through getting acclimated to that environment. But then when we started working on Torch and we started generating like demo videos, or like we started giving people demos of Torch, I had more than a few people ask like, oh, but this is video. Like this is like, they're like, when will we ever get to a point where I can go up and walk around that thing? And I was like, right now, like here's the iPad.
Hold
go
my phone.
Like, so like people are still like a bit. That's why we had a little dust up in the Discord because people want to start talking about acronyms of AR, VR, MR, all this stuff. And I'm like, it so doesn't matter, because honestly, 90% of the consumers call what you call AR or MR, they call it VR. If they call it anything at all. And like, and so you got to get out of that mindset of like, you've got to, you really do have to work backwards.
It's too early to get tribal about anything. Yeah.
Well,
Totally.
and people just don't have enough knowledge. That's what I mean. Like, it made me realize, holy shit, when people see these AR demo videos, they think that they're After Effects video, like, or they don't realize that you could get up and fully interact and walk around. You could have this in your room. This isn't just happening in this room, you know, like all that stuff, all that fundamental mental model of what this stuff is not that common. It's not, you know, it's a part of our like job. We have talked about this a lot on this show too. Like, we do a lot of education, and a lot of it is like trying to understand the person you're talking to, how much they really get what they're looking at, and not trying to dazzle them with every little bell and whistle, but say like, you know, kind of goes back to the cube. Like,
put a cube on the table.
You do realize you can touch that, like you can walk around that cube. You can gesture it with your hand, and like it's not some, you know,
like
other
like
thing.
you know, back in the 70s when they first started text adventures, right? Like you would boot up a text adventure, and there would literally just
die
be
of dysentery.
but there would just be a cursor and nothing, right? And you would type. You would just be, what the, okay. And so you type, and like eventually you would say that like, I look, and it tells you the description of the room, and you're like, go west, and it goes west, and it gives you another little description of the room. But like, you had no idea what you were even supposed to type, like the verbs.
Right.
It was, and so like for a few years of text adventures, people would just like type, and eventually it got to be boring as shit, and so people would just like do the question mark, and it would give you all the verbs. But like that exact moment in time is approximately where this space is, where like I can put something on your head and give you the most state-of-the-art, amazingly quote unquote intuitive thing in the universe that like will read your entire body and do the right thing. And the average person will sit there and go, now what? Like, where's the any key?
Right.
Because they don't know the verbs.
Yeah.
They don't know what it is that they can do, what they can't do. And you've just told them they have a whatever dollar piece of equipment on their face. They're scared shitless. They're going to break it. And so they sit there and they don't move.
So Brian, you just coming back from the future, that is a hard thing for you in your Star Trek future world that you just came out of. Imagine trying to tell someone how to use their iPad or their iPhone, and you have to hold it up and then think about moving around it and then touch the phone, which is actually touching that thing over there. There's this whole disconnect. I think that it's actually, you know, I mean, if you guys are having a hard time with head-mounted displays, you know, there's even another layer of separation when you've got
we have
your hand,
we have a lot of preconceived notions about that slab of glass, and they don't include spatial awareness and all that. Right. But back to the I like the text based, like and in my mind I'm thinking so these people that argue about terminology, those are the people that made the game you're talking about, and they're arguing about, should we call it a MUD or a text based adventure? Right. Meanwhile, the user's like, I still don't know what to do. I still don't know what to do. And you telling me it's a text-based adventure does not help me figure that out.
Exactly.
Right.
I don't know if that was
who came up with MMORPG?
Oh well,
probably Sony on EverQuest.
What? Well, Ultima. There was something before Ultima though.
But I think
Ultima
on the planet.
I think I think Ultima was still considered like a online computer role playing game. It was like a OC RPG.
I'm sorry, I have OC RPG.
Eric, he's like Timothy says, nothing is intuitive, everything is learned.
It's right. Like the one of the things that always made me laugh most about like the notion that like, well, everybody has hands, and so we all know how to use our hands, except for the fact that everybody has their hands,
right.
And they're different shape, they're different weight, they're different length from your body. They maybe like doesn't even bend as much as other people's fingers. Everybody has a different. Like I can't even imagine if you were trying to like design a game for the PlayStation where everybody had a slightly different joystick. You know what I mean? Like that would not be fun to try and make, right? And so like when people tell me that, like, oh, but everybody knows how to use their hands, and it's like, yeah, the key word there is there. Yeah, like that's the key word, and like, that's the thing you have to try and figure out.
That reminded me of one more story. Oh, go ahead.
Real quick. This is 1, 2, 3. Right, but I know a lot of people in Europe where it's 1, 2. No, what is it? It's 1, 2, 3. Right.
Or you do 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
Right. Like that. That's just a really, really simple way of counting, and it's different depending on what geographical location you come from.
Yeah.
So when you're telling the story about the scan and doing the world's hardest workout, lifting sandbags, it reminded me. I meant to bring this story up earlier. I don't know if you have the video of it, but so at this point, I think we've established Brian is a muscular man and very strong, and we often had these internal debates around gestures as input. And we kept making the case for you don't want a primarily hand-based, because if you wanted the Minority Report interface and you hold your hand above your heart, and so we did that usability or that user research test where you finally proved to everyone you could not hold your hand above your shoulder for like it was only a couple minutes, right, before you started shaking at least, and we're like,
well, the funny thing is we actually ended up finding an interview with Tom Cruise.
Oh, really?
He said where Tom Cruise said that filming those scenes was some of the hardest physical exercise that he has done in years, or some shit like that.
He does his own stunts,
and he does his own stunts. Like that guy is paid to be in crazy shape, and like even he said that was ridiculous.
Yeah. So that just so everybody, like anytime you see anyone that's worked in this space, and you hear Minority Report like or Iron Man, you get a nice big eye roll from anybody.
No. Iron Man visuals, I still say,
get out of here.
A great input. No, it's a really great way to start your visual process. Is do glowy wireframes because it gives you the spatial,
minimal pixels
to give you spatial awareness of the object that you're looking at. And I think that the Iron Man, kind of like aesthetic really, really works for AR just to get it out there and to look at it and see if it works or not.
I'm talking about the people that aim for that as the gold standard of functional interfaces. And you're like,
in fact, if anybody's out there is trying to get a job in, mixed reality, just know that mentioning Minority Report is largely a litmus test of whether or not you know what you're talking about. If you bring it up as a positive, you will probably get a negative score on that interview.
And
you can bring it up as a UI interface that does not work.
Well, if you'll
get some kudos.
If you're interviewing for a company that says they're trying to build it, run. We're building the interface. There was actually a company that is no longer with us that like they bragged about hiring the guy that designed the movie versions of those interfaces, and they're no longer with us.
That company that designed that interface actually went into production in building that interface.
No, I know. No,
for a while. Yeah.
There was the company that bragged about hiring the designer of the movie version of the aesthetic. But no, they're actually, we should talk about that. We should bring that up in the chat. That company's the company that did like the system design of that has been pushing forward on that. But yeah, the hand, just so everybody knows, the hand tracking thing was like, people just assume you're going to like be like an orchestra conductor with your hands out away from your body and above your heart for hours on end, manipulating stuff naturally. And it turns out that that's actually not a very natural way.
Well, right. And the question is, it's like, if I do this, what does that mean? If I go like this,
you got a fly in your face.
How do you define what that is? Is that take this model that I'm working on and move it to the right, to my right, your left, or is it like there? It's so ambiguous what we do with our hands. When I'm doing like this, am I fucking up my whole model when I'm doing this? I'm like, I'm talking to you, and everything's crashing and throwing around, and there's paint blobs going everywhere.
So to that point, Spence, we actually made we actually were working on some prototypes where like you would use manipulation with your hands and do things with your hands, but then if you started talking, it would realize that you're in a conversation and it would subdue the craziness so that you could like give crap while you were talking and nothing would happen, and then when you stopped talking, things like just started working again. Like, so
were you listening for the microphone?
But that works the other direction though, because then I'm working on something and I'm talking to you and it's ignoring my input. Right. So don't talk to me. I'm working.
I see nothing wrong with that.
Well, we are 1 hour and 30 minutes in, as usual, with our guest. This has been super fun. I knew it would be. We really didn't plan this one out much because we didn't need to. I'm definitely 3 beers into my 2 beer bladder, so that's probably a good reason to also sign off. Thanks so much, Brian. Brian came super last minute. Is awesome. I don't
super cool.
I honestly yesterday I was like, I think Spencer and I have to do our own show again. This has been like we've literally 16 episodes in a row. We've had guests, and Brian is in our Discord. So by the way, go to chat.xrtalk.net to shortcut to our Discord. And he was.
What's your handle, man?
Lederhosen.
Yeah, Brian is later. If you don't know, he's
no
later.
Pants.
Yeah, no.
I hate pants.
And
I hate pants. I hate them.
And it was funny because he was like, we should get together and drink beer and talk shit sometime. I'm like, wait a minute, that's our show. That is how you describe our show. So let's just have you.
So are we gonna do the
the poster frame. We're gonna recreate the Schwabich. Wait, I gotta.
Right. This way, and then
Brian, you need to center and move closer.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, I think we got it.
Close enough. God damn it.
Yeah. Thanks so much, man.
Ridiculous, right there.
Yeah. Thanks so much, man. Yeah, we'll see you in the chat, and keep us posted on what you're up to. I think we covered a lot of really awesome stuff. Thanks so much. Thanks for everybody in the audience. We had a lot of old friends and name show up. Mike Keith, we're gonna have you on too, buddy. You're in my target.
Tucker, Tell
Mike
Tucker we have tried the Oculus Quest hand tracking, and it's decent, but it's got some lag.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Yeah. I switched mine over once they made it like a release feature, but honestly, I grab the controllers every time. Yeah. So, we gotta get Mike Tucker on. Maybe we can get. I wonder. Well, maybe we'll have to do a group.
He can talk to you. He can tell you about working with Kanye.
Oh yeah, I love those stories. Oh my gosh. All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
See you guys.